Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. The US may leave the Ukraine negotiating table if no progress on a peace deal is reached in the next few days, warns Washington Secretary of State Marco Rubio. We'll have more on that in a moment. But first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Italy's Prime Minister seeks to mend the EU's strained transatlantic ties. The International Criminal Court investigates Hungary's actions towards Israel's Netanyahu. And Polish football teams lose in the Conference League quarterfinals. We have other priorities to focus on as well, says US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, warning that Washington may abandon its diplomatic efforts concentrated on reaching peace in Ukraine if they don't produce effect soon. The ultimatum comes ahead of the meeting of European and American allies planned for next week in London. Jeremy Hołodniuk reports on the progress of the peace talks.
The time to end the war in Ukraine is now. That's according to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who added that Washington will stop trying to broker a peace deal within days unless there are clear signs that an agreement can be reached.
We're not going to continue with this endeavor for weeks and months on end. So we need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on as well.
He also emphasized that Ukraine's ability to defend itself would have to be a part of any agreement.
In order for there to be peace, we recognize that Ukraine has to feel like it has the ability to defend itself from a future attack from anyone. Every country in the world has that right. But so I think everyone recognizes that Ukraine's ability to defend itself is going to be a part, it's its right as a country, and will be a part of any agreement.
Some believe that American patience is simply running out after weeks of US-backed efforts to end the conflict.
Americans are trying to be the best possible mediators, trying to push this kind of ceasefire deal, but still there is no yet tangible result. There is no tangible result yet. So the American patience is running out. They have other also priorities.
The US Vice President, meanwhile, presented a less grim outlook on the peace process.
I won't prejudge them, but we do feel optimistic that we can hopefully bring this war, this very brutal war, to a close.
Comments from US officials come a day after French President Emmanuel Macron hosted Rubio and Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff for talks where European and Ukrainian officials pleaded Kyiv's case. The talks are expected to resume in London next week.
The US is trying to show that there is progress on the negotiations, so this is favorable to them also. And we can see that there might be a momentum. Another discussion will be held in London, and we will see if there is concrete things going out of these discussions or not.
Washington and Kyiv, meanwhile, signed a memorandum on the minerals deal. The memorandum means that the actual deal can be signed next week.
Our intentions are positive, we are constructive, and we are showing this. Honestly, I think this memorandum is an important first step.
Should the minerals deal be signed, it could add new momentum to the peace process.
The elements that are under question with respect to Ukraine are currently located in areas that are Russia-controlled. Right. And so gaining or regaining access to those deposits, not only for the U.S., for Ukraine and Western allies, is something that has larger geopolitical significance.
With the U.S. hinting at stepping back from its role, the path to peace remains uncertain, with the next days crucial for Kyiv.
Russians have quickly responded to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's comments on the progress of peace talks. The Kremlin spokesperson has assured that Moscow is still committed to the negotiation process. Meanwhile, Russian strikes rain more death on Ukrainian civilians. We are joined now live by our Ukraine correspondent, Os Katerji. Good evening, Os. So what are the reactions in Kyiv to the American ultimatum?
So still no response from Kyiv to the ultimatum, although I expect we will have some kind of response in the coming hours or days, given that this ultimatum was given by Secretary of State Marco Rubio following discussions with officials, French officials and Ukrainian officials, with proposals to send back to Kyiv from the United States. Now, Bloomberg are reporting that those proposals include easing sanctions, European sanctions, on Russia in exchange for a ceasefire deal that would leave the lines of control effectively as they currently are. Now, this is something that is not going to appeal to the Europeans, and it certainly isn't going to appeal to the Ukrainians. So that sense of frustration coming through in Rubio's tone there about the US willing to walk away from these negotiations if there isn't any significant progress. It should be stated again that Kyiv accepted Washington's proposals for a 30-day temporary unconditional ceasefire, and the Russians have rejected it. But once again, the pressure seems to be being applied towards Kyiv. It has to be said that Kyiv doesn't want the US to walk away. It wants to continue a partnership. It has this mineral deal. They want security guarantees. They want to keep the US engaged. But so far, there's no sign of any pressure coming from Washington towards Russia. Now, there's been another attack, Good Friday, in Kharkiv, a cluster munition attack. Russia's been using these cluster munitions in Kryvyi, Sumy, now here in Kharkiv. One person killed, 112 injured in this attack. 30 apartment buildings and 20 houses were damaged in these strikes. Now, Zelensky forcefully condemned this in a statement released on Telegram. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
One must be an outright scumbag and despise life to carry out such missile strikes on an ordinary city on Good Friday, the eve of Easter. And when we appeal to our partners, primarily the United States, for Patriot systems and missiles for them that can protect against this Russian evil, against cruise missiles and ballistic threats, we are asking for the kind of protection every nation deserves.
A further plea from Zelensky there for more US Patriot systems. But again, this requires a buy-in from Washington, from the White House, or some pressure applied on Russia to stop these daily attacks on Ukrainian cities. But so far, no sign of Kyiv getting its way in that regard with Washington. All the pressure at the moment seems to be being applied towards Kyiv.
That was Oscar Taji reporting from Kyiv. Thank you very much, Oz, and stay safe. US Vice President JD Vance is in Rome for meetings with the Vatican's top officials and Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, only a day after her return from meeting with President Donald Trump in Washington. Kazimierz Łysiak investigates whether Meloni can serve as a bridge between the EU and the US as Brussels seeks a way to mend strained transatlantic relations.
Italian Conservative Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has just returned from a high-profile meeting in Washington with President Donald Trump. And only a day later, US Vice President JD Vance touched down in Rome to continue the discussions on American-Italian relations. Ukraine was also in focus.
We have a couple of important issues to discuss today. I want to update the Prime Minister on some of the negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, and also some of the things that have happened, even in the past 24 hours.
The right-wing Prime Minister has gotten plenty of praise from both Trump and Vance over the last few days, and the feelings appear to be mutual.
We believe that Italy can be an extremely important partner in Europe and the Mediterranean for the United States of America, and certainly, in short, there is a privileged relationship between us, of which I am very proud.
Experts say the European Union sees these warm relations as an opportunity to get its foot in the door.
Meloni is beneficial as a bridge. Now, she is building this bridge, she's bringing this bridge, and now we need to have our negotiators to walk the bridge, and they are going to be led by Maroš Šefčovič, the trade commissioner.
The 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, as well as the temporary baseline 10% on all other goods imported to the United States, have been a major headache for the EU. But the Trump administration is ready to talk business.
But of course, we're having some big trade negotiations between not just Italy and the United States, but the whole European Union. We talked a great deal about that yesterday with the president, and we'll follow up on those conversations today.
So, can Giorgia Meloni really become the EU's Trump whisperer? The answer is anything but straightforward.
Trump is not a person, he's not a politician that you can whisper to and he's going to do what you want him to do. Clearly, President Trump has manifested time and time again that he's the master of his own mind and he will take decisions on his own ground.
It's a topic that we are
After her meeting with President Trump in Washington, Meloni announced the US head of state would return the favor with a visit to Rome in the near future. She also hinted at a possible meeting between Trump and EU officials during that trip. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
The International Criminal Court has demanded Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán provide a reason as to why he rolled out the red carpet for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rather than arrest him. The legal filing comes as the Hungarian Prime Minister announced he would withdraw his country from the Hague-based institution. And so we are joined now live by our European correspondent Angela Skurgins, who has been following this story closely. Good evening, Angela. So what happens next?
Yes, so Budapest has not only become the bugbear of the EU, but international politics. Now, the ICC issued that petition on Wednesday demanding that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán offer an explanation as to why he did not cuff the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when that leader visited Budapest for a state visit roughly 2 weeks ago. Now, the ICC has invited that Hungarian Prime Minister to offer a submission. The deadline is May 24th. TVP World did ask the office of the Hungarian Prime Minister whether or not they would comply with this order. We did not get a formal response to our questions. However, a spokesperson referred us to a video published online by the spokespeople team from that Hungarian Prime Minister outlining the reasons why he did not throw Benjamin Netanyahu behind bars when he visited Budapest. Let's take a listen to that clip.
The first is that it is not customary. We don't arrest guests, plain and simple. The second reason is that we didn't want to, because Israel is our friend, and the purpose of foreign policy in any country is to make friends. And it is good that Israel is not an enemy of Hungary, not even a neutral state, but a friend. And the third reason is that even if we wanted to, we could not have ordered the police to do it, because we have never promulgated this international treaty or made it part of Hungarian law.
Now, the reason that this trip is particularly interesting is that it came months after the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu for alleged war crimes stemming from the Israel-Hamas war. It's important to note, however, that the ICC also arrested arrest warrants for Hamas commanders as well as the defense minister from Israel. But the timing is quite interesting also. During this visit, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán announced that he would withdraw Hungary from the 24-year-old ICC. This is an institution his country played a leading role in founding. This was warmly welcomed by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during that trip. Let's take a listen to what he had to say at a press conference from that time.
You stand with us at the EU. You stand with us at the UN. And you've just taken a bold and principled position on the ICC, and I thank you, Victor.
So what happens next? The key date to look out for is May 23rd. That is the deadline for when Hungary can formally submit to this inquiry and this petition. So all eyes will be on that calendar to see whether or not they will comply and what consequences the ICC can mete out to that country. But that's all from me. I'll send it back to you in Warsaw.
That was Angela Skurgins reporting from Brussels. Thank you very much, Angela. Hundreds of prominent Russian figures have been granted Serbian citizenships since the beginning of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, a journalistic investigation has revealed. This puts further strain on already tense relations between Belgrade and Brussels as Serbia continues to declare its European ambitions. Zuzanna Jurek reports.
It is in our national interest, claim Serbian officials as they hand out passports to Russian nationals. According to the file uncovered by independent Russian outlet iStories and Serbia's Krik, at least 204 Russian nationals have been granted Serbian citizenship since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This includes individuals with close ties going all the way to Russian President Vladimir Putin or to the Chechen leader Razvan Kadyrov.
In hundreds of decisions on granting Serbian citizenship for services rendered from 2022 to April 2025, the names of dozens of Russians closely connected to the military-industrial complex, the Kremlin, oligarchs, state corporations, and even special services are listed. None of them appear on sanctions lists and, therefore, can freely travel with a Serbian passport.
Serbia's citizenship laws allow for accelerated naturalization for people who are considered to have special merits. The issue of lax passport rules in Serbia has been a point of contention between Belgrade and Brussels for quite some time.
These are, of course, people that will not benefit Serbian citizens, but they might benefit the government because these seem to be people who are profiteering from the war, that are close to security organizations in Russia or possibly oligarchs.
According to the Financial Times, the European Commission has previously warned Serbia that it might suspend visa-free travel for Serbian nationals if the country continues relaxing passport rules for Russians. The issue also comes at a time when student-led demonstrations have entered their 6th consecutive month, fueling domestic instability.
The protests have been broadened to full extent, as now they are actually people's protests. They were started by students of universities, all universities in Serbia, from 4 different cities. Definitely the demands that were set on the beginning have not been met.
With protesters demanding government accountability,
we're trying to achieve higher pressure on our institutions so they will start doing their job as they should.
Over the Novi Sad tragedy, wildly blamed on government corruption.
On 1st of November 2024, a canopy of one of the largest railway stations that is placed in Novi Sad has collapsed, killing at that time 15 people.
And with the political pressure on the Serbian government unlikely to dissipate anytime soon, President Aleksandar Vučić seeks to turn to his tentative allies. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
As the presidential campaign in Poland enters its final stage, some candidates are eager to do anything to make their name more visible. Far-right MEP Grzegorz Braun has seriously disrupted operations at a hospital and put its patients' health in danger while live streaming his actions on social media. Braun is currently polling at around 1% ahead of the presidential vote scheduled for May. Sonia Gatabiszczan reports.
There are lots of ways to campaign ahead of an election, but Grzegorz Braun, one of the candidates for Polish president, may have just opted for the most unusual one, trying to carry out a citizen's arrest on a gynecologist. The doctor had provided an abortion to a patient in her 36th week of pregnancy due to a fetal abnormality.
I am doing my job in accordance with the medical guidelines and the Polish law.
According to the gynecologist's account, Braun barged into the hospital and kept the doctor in a room for over an hour, preventing her from doing her job. In turn, the prosecutor's office launched an investigation into the incident on a number of grounds, including
whether it caused a risk to life and health of OBGYN patients who were in the midst of giving birth.
All his public appearances and events like that we saw last days, that just only cynical way of getting support for his political activity.
Braun, a far-right politician, is the leader of the Confederation of the Polish Crown Party and a European parliamentarian.
His main goal there is to destabilize the European Union from the inside.
Braun is no stranger to unusual incidents. In December 2023, he used a fire extinguisher to douse the candles of a Hanukkah menorah at the Polish parliament. He was stripped of his immunity as a Polish lawmaker, but continues to enjoy immunity as an MEP.
He thinks that as a member of the European Parliament, he can do anything, openly commit crimes in front of cameras, but that is not what the parliamentary immunity is for.
With a background in movie directing, Braun may have a knack for marketing, but more may be needed to become Poland's next president.
Because he appeals to extreme, he will never be in the middle as a serious political game player in this country.
Poland is set to hold presidential elections on May 18th. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczyn.
The beautiful dream has come to an end. The last two Polish football teams, Legia Warsaw and Jagiellonia Białystok, have been eliminated from UEFA's Conference League after exciting quarter-final games against Chelsea and Real Betis. Thanks to their fantastic performance this year, Poland has advanced to the 15th place in the European Football Association ranking, thus granting more Polish clubs a chance to play in continental competitions. Alex Sumiński has this report.
On Thursday, Legia Warsaw and Jagiellonia Białystok exited the UEFA Conference League, but their quarter-final appearances went down as the highest European runs by any Polish club this century. Legia may have lost to Chelsea 3-0 last week, but on Thursday it was a well-earned 2-1 win over Chelsea in London, marking a first historic victory of a Polish team in England in European Cups. Jagiellonia drew 1-1 with Spain's Real Betis in the second leg of their quarter-final tie at home in Poland, having previously finished 0-2 during the first leg in Seville.
Especially for Jagiellonia, it's a very huge achievement because it's the first time when they arrived so far in a tournament in a Conference League. For Legia also, it was the first time since a long time that they arrived so far.
Both Polish clubs have taken advantage of the competition, and because they finished the tournament in the quarterfinals, Poland has now moved up in the UEFA chart to 15th, leaving countries like Croatia behind in the ranking.
That gives an opportunity to have not one, but two clubs in the qualifiers of Champions League, so the most important competitions, and three more clubs in a Conference League. So in the previous seasons, we had just one club fighting for the Champions League.
First legs of the semi-finals will take place on May 1st, with Real Betis facing Fiorentina and Djurgården taking on Chelsea. This season's Conference League final will take place in Wrocław, southwestern Poland, on May 28th.
The Trump administration is growing wary with the slow progress of peace talks on Ukraine. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that if the situation does not change in the coming days, the US will abandon its push to broker a peace deal. Is this the end of all hopes for a ceasefire in Ukraine? Well, to discuss it, we are joined by Professor Daniela Schwarzer, Executive Board Member at the Bertelsmann Stiftung and expert in international politics. Good evening.
Good evening.
If there are no signs of goodwill, the peace talks are progressing, in the progress of the peace talks in the next few days, the US will simply move on, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced. So I'm wondering, who was this statement addressed to? Is Rubio threatening Kyiv with withdrawing the American support, or rather Moscow with more sanctions?
Well, first of all, I think we have to note that Rubio, the Foreign Secretary of the United States, wasn't very closely involved in the previous negotiation attempts. And so we have to take it with a grain of salt. There are several people around Donald Trump who are engaged. Rubio's one of them, but he at some points is not the closest to the president. So we'll see what happens. I think it is a way of messaging that Donald Trump may indeed drop the issue. He has set a deadline of 100 days. And those will be reached sometime soon. And I think at this point, it is a message both to Ukraine, but also to Russia. And it seems to me that after the latest meetings, in particular the one in Paris, the United States have signaled that they see that actually Ukraine is ready to negotiate. There have been advancements on the mineral deal. And in general, Ukraine has now come back to a situation where there seem to be constructive talks with the White House after this disastrous meeting with President Zelensky in Washington, D.C. So in my view, the situation between Kyiv and Washington is now better than it was even a few weeks ago, and Europeans are now getting more involved. There was a meeting in Paris, there will be one in London next week. So I think that signaling is basically to all sides, and it may actually prepare the way for Donald Trump to no longer be so much involved in this deal. We know of him that he wants quick success. He has raised other issues in foreign policy that seem to matter to him now. Iran is one of them. And so it can well be that actually Foreign Secretary Rubio is preparing some kind of disengagement of the United States. But the good news is that Europeans are now getting more and more involved.
So the situation is getting a little better, and yet President Zelensky claims U.S. envoy Witkoff is promoting the Russian narrative. Trump, on the other hand, says that he is not happy with his Ukrainian counterpart. Can we therefore guess what would be the shape of the peace deal proposed by Washington? Well, Bloomberg actually claims it has obtained some information, and according to the media outlet, it consists of freezing of the front line, Ukraine being banned from joining NATO, and the easing of sanctions on Russia. But also, it's worth noting that it's about European sanctions. Well, what do you think of it? Is this something that both parties of the conflict could agree to?
Well, the Ukrainian side has made very clear throughout the last month that it needs security guarantees, and that is very much understandable, as the European security order has been shattered because of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the violation of international law and principles, and now some doubts about the US engagement in Europe. It is absolutely understandable that Ukraine keeps saying we need a reliable set of security guarantees. And I think this is where indeed, the US and Europe have to work very closely together. So I think it is very good news that now France, the UK, and others are getting more and more involved, because it has to be carried by more parties. It's not about only striking a deal and an agreement, but really to making sure security guarantees are credible. With regards to the other elements which you gave, I can well imagine that these are in the US proposal, but an American proposal, of course, needs to be accepted by both sides. And I think both the Ukrainian side and the Russian side will have their expectations. So this is a first step in a new round of negotiations, and London is the next meeting this coming week. And I hope there will be constructive conversations, but they indeed also need to involve Russia, where movement has been very little over the past weeks, if not to say no movement at all, but enhanced attacks on Ukraine, which actually shows that the Kremlin at this point doesn't want to signal any credible interest in negotiating a ceasefire, which could then lead to a potential peace deal.
Now, I have a question about timing. Only yesterday, President Zelensky claimed that the minerals deal could be signed even the same day, but Donald Trump responded that he would need a week to do that. Now, what does the US need this week for?
Well, I think they probably need to review whether in the deal they get enough in terms of insurance of access and control. And on the other hand, of course, Ukraine needs to make sure that the deal doesn't give away too much and is linked to a wider deal, which has to involve security guarantees from the Ukrainian perspective. So I think we are witnessing a negotiation game where the US side plays on time. Ukraine has said it wants this kind of deal. But also, if you look at the criticism that you've just quoted of President Zelensky criticizing the US side picking up Putin's rhetoric, there is caution on both sides. And Ukraine, quite rightly so, points out what its interests are in all of this. So the raw materials deal needs to be seen in the wider context where Ukraine will insist on security guarantees. And I think that is very important, because it's not just about a transactionary deal. It is about rebuilding a security order in Europe that is reliable to Ukraine.
Now, Leslie, let's take a look at the bigger picture. President Zelensky repeats that China is very much involved in the conflict in Ukraine. We also know that Iran is, by providing, for example, Shahed drones for Russia, and Tehran has signed a strategic deal with Russia in the support of its nuclear program as well. And now we have negotiations between Tehran and the US. And Tehran wants Russian support in these talks. Now, I guess these are all connected. Now, how will this impact peace talks over Ukraine?
Well, first of all, I think you very clearly pointed out that so many parties are now involved in Russia's war on Ukraine. You didn't mention North Korea. I think that also needs mentioning, because you see a group of countries that all group together against the political West, including Iran, including China, obviously including Russia and North Korea. And this is why the situation is really dangerous, and it's also very relevant to understand that Russia gets a lot of backing. Now, we now are in a phase where the security arenas in Asia and in Europe are very clearly linked. For the negotiations, I think it is crucial that China, which has so far kept out and has signaled an interest in the war ending, but no readiness either to withdraw support from Russia or to take some kind of more active role in negotiations, that China changes positions. Over the past now 3 years of the war, there has been ample documentation to what extent China supports Russia through the import of dual-use products, through more energy imports into China, and in other ways. So I think it is a crucial element to the sustainability of Russia's war effort that China backs it. And in my view, if the US really wants to be serious about pushing for successful negotiations, the contacts with China over an end to this conflict definitely need to be intensified.
Professor Daniela Schwarze, Executive Board Member at the Bertelsmann Stiftung, was our guest tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.